they've been dealing with this for so long that they want their mind to be clear and they want their mind to be free. And that's totally possible. But sometimes as they're struggling through this, sometimes for years, we've known people that have been dealing with this for 30 or 40 years. And they realize, oh my gosh, there is hope, and I can renew my mind, and I can get rid of all of this. And what a relief. But what, we look at it also to why we also have a focus to help parents is because we don't want people to struggle for 30 years, for 40 years. We want them to be able to be proactive so that never happens. You know? We don't want a society of people who are struggling their whole life for something that can be overcome.
Yes. Mm-hmm. There's nothing too hard for God.
Right.
And I know you people very well, and I know you're spiritual and God-led, and that renewing of the mind sticks also, because that's biblical, and that's something I've been teaching on, is the renewing of our minds, because we can get into a slump because of these things.
Oh, definitely. It'll affect every area of your life.
Yeah.
Parenting, your work, your relationship with your spouse.
You lose everything.
Yeah.
You can lose everything.
Yeah.
Actually, some people even lose their life because it is a huge part of suicide.
Right.
There was actually, just going to this real quick here, there was actually a hookup site to have affairs. It's called Ashley Madison. Mm-hmm. The hackers got into that and they exposed all the names of all these high influential people. There was actually a pastor that was on the list. He had a grace church. He extended grace to everyone. He didn't extend grace to everyone, but he preached how God extends grace. He couldn't extend grace to himself, and he was found dead on his kitchen floor. He left behind a wife and 2 children because he was exposed and found out. He couldn't deal with it.
Wow. The way I see this is it's no different than someone coming back from the military having PTSD. It's a mind thing that conquers us, and it's addiction. It's just like being an addict on heroin or something.
Well, it is a little bit different. That's why there are some recovery groups throughout the United States that are a general recovery group per se, and they would cover drugs and alcohol and gambling and sexual addiction. But what happens is, because sexual addiction is also not just a physical addiction, but it's also in the mind. It captures your mind. It's a spiritual addiction as well. That's why we do have the separate recovery group for that, because what works for physical addiction, drugs and alcohol, doesn't always work with, or doesn't always help the spiritual part and in your mind, because sexual addiction is a twofold, where it's not just physical, but it is
mental.
Yes, exactly.
Kenyatta, you actually touched on something there real quick about the PTSD and the mind.
Yes, sir.
Well, on our Facebook site, one of our pictures on there that you can go to, it's Unashamed by Grace on Facebook, and it shows you 3 pictures.
Is that a .com or a .org?
I don't have
.org.
Well, it's just on the Facebook.
Oh, on Facebook, yeah.
Our website is currently being redone.
Okay.
So our website, or our Facebook is out there, Unashamed by Grace.
Okay.
But on there, you had just mentioned about the heroin, you had mentioned PTSD.
Yes.
Well, what you'll see on there is 3 images of a brain scan. You're going to see on the left a normal brain. On the right, you're going to see a brain that has been on heroin, and then to the other side of that is going to be a brain that has been on porn. And if you'll notice on those pictures there, the one with pornography is actually a little bit more messed up than the one with heroin.
Yeah. So
but the thing is, with heroin, it's an outside source coming in to your body, a chemical.
Chemical, yeah.
With the pornography, you have an outside stimuli, but it's going through your eye gates. The chemical and the pharmacy is in your brain, which we can talk about another time in another show, but you're using your own oxytocins, dopamines, and all these different things to flood, and when you see an image, it floods your brain, and it gives you that release, that high, and then as soon as you release that and everything, you go back into the bad feelings and the shame. So much like a heroin addict would have to do another hit,
Yeah.
that to get the feeling again of normalcy and of wellness, you would have to go back to view pornography again. So it's just a vicious cycle there. And once people start understanding that, it's amazing. And it's been over the last 10 years that they've actually really been able to map the brain and see how this really affects the brain. It's not just, is it an addiction nowadays? It's a clinical addiction. So
People don't realize a lot of this. And how many husbands and wives are struggling with this?
More than you would know. Yeah, more than you would think.
well, in a church, let's see, what is our church seat? 1,500?
Yeah, 2,000.
So, okay, in 2000, let's see, it's about 76% of the church body that have actually said in polls that they have an addiction.
Wow.
So, out of 1,000, there's 760. So, what is that, 1520? 1,520 men in that, if it was all men, 1,520 men would be addicted to pornography in that church building.
Wow.
But it's not mentioned. They don't talk about it. It's not, because as soon as you say, "Hey, just like at Thrive, when this was first birthed, the second day of confirmation that of what I heard on a Saturday night, it was a Sunday morning. Nathan Bentley again, going back to him real quick. He came out and he had told his story, and he took a poll. He said, "I want to see a show of hands because I want to pray for you guys. How many here are addicted to alcohol?" A few raise your hand.
Mm-hmm.
How many here come in currently addicted to drugs? A few raise your hands. Okay, how many come in here currently feel you're addicted or have a problem with pornography? Nearly 90% of the building, in an honest poll, raised their hand that day. So that was another confirmation of Unashamed by Grace was born that weekend, and then to see this. But that's how many people in that building raised their hands, saying that they had a problem.
Well, and I would say almost everyone that we talk to, friends, people that, here and there, friends that know people in our business, once we share about our ministry, everyone always has a story of either themselves or someone they know, a family member that is struggling, not necessarily has overcome, but a lot of them know currently someone. So that's why, earlier when we said it's an epidemic, it's out of control. And so
it's $1 billion business.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, it's $97 billion a year per year, and it's going to grow. Because now we just saw it. It's actually one of our things on our Facebook that we put out there. We don't rewrite all the stuff. We don't need to do that. We weren't. This ministry wasn't birthed to write our own material. It was birthed to get the message out. So there's other sites that we use too, and we pull from. One of them is now virtual reality. They have virtual reality video games. They have virtual reality pornography now, to where you're in a 3D immersed world. You put your little headset on because you can actually take your phone, put it in, and you got a headset, you got your earmuffs, and you're engrossed, and you're in a 3D world of pornography. And another thing that they've actually, the pornography world industry is doing to make it more mainstream, there's another one that has an exercise app to where it's trying to get the wives involved more. Honey, look at this. We can exercise together. We can burn calories. So what they do is they show you these images,
deceptive tactics,
pornography of different positions, different moves, and they're saying, if you do this, you're going to burn X amount of calories and get so many points. So then you go, hey, look, I got 1,000 points. I got a gold star. Man. So they're getting and they even show it in a cartoon way. So what does that do? So a kid, teenagers are going to say, hey, I'm going to go work out. And you're going over to somebody's house and you're working out. So
they find a way. What he's saying is, they'll find a way. The industry will find a way to get in any way they can. Yeah.
It's like Satan.
Yeah, exactly. They get the foot in the door any way they can.
Because what does this actually attack? This addiction. This attacks families, attacks the husband, takes the leader out of the home.
Yeah.
It attacks their seed, because that's the other thing too, is it's a generational curse. Because once those neural pathways are triggered, actually when you have your seed, those neural pathways will transfer to the next, and to the next,
wow.
to the next. And it's what it basically is doing is proving the Bible right. How they always said that the sins of the father can be passed, and the generational curses,
Yes.
is the generational curse is actually spread through the gene. It's the neural pathways, and they found that out with using, unfortunately, lab rats and stuff. But they would actually have them go to find the cheese over in this spot, and the next generation would actually know exactly where to go to find that cheese
without ever experiencing that themselves.
But then when they would take that same
Wow.
rat and they would recondition that rat to find the cheese at another spot, then his offspring would actually not go back to this one, but it would go to another one. So it would actually, you could actually map it, and they could see how the next generations would. But then when they got it to a controlled state again, to where they went back to the normal, so you rewrite the brain,
Mm-hmm.
then it would actually go and trigger to where you would just do it as normal thing.
He
So
wouldn't
you
go to
can-
try to find the cheese anymore.
Wow.
So we got to train these men to go find the cheese in the right spot,
That's it.
because we've been looking for the cheese in the wrong spot.
Through Unashamed by Grace,
Through
they
Unashamed
get the
by
renewing of their
Grace.
mind.
You'll learn where to find the
Break
cheese.
those generational curses and find the right cheese, the good cheese.
You don't want Limburger cheese. It's stinky. So.
Now I have a question for Joanne. What about the women? You know, it's kind of a social thing that they believe men are the only ones, but there's just as many women in the porn industry in that mode, walking the streets, doing all this stuff. How many women come forth for help?
Not as many. There aren't as many women that struggle with that as there are as men, but there aren't as many resources for the women. One thing that we have with our group, though, is with Unashamed by Grace, we have the men's group, and we have a separate group for the spouses of the husbands. But the spouses, the wives, aren't the sexually addicted. That is another ministry down the road.
Okay.
But there are resources out there for them. But it's very similar. I mean, it affects them in just the same way as Brian was saying. You know, as far as with the stress, and it affects their family and their children, their work life, their their future generations. But right now, like Brian was saying, with the men, because the men are biblically the leaders of the home, that's what Satan, the enemy, typically goes after, because if he can attack the men, and then it affects the entire family.
Takes the whole family out.
Right, exactly.
I will say one thing on the part of the women,
Yes.
and it's one thing I had just found recently, and I don't even think you saw it yet. There's another website out there. It's called Fight the New Drug, and the new drug is the sexual addiction, because that's the internal pharmacy of the drug. So,
Right.
it talks about here the women are 113% more likely to search the term hardcore and spend nearly a minute and a half longer on the site. Also, the gap between men and women watching porn is closing fast. So like she said before, the men are the bigger ones in it, but the way society is changing right now, it is starting to close the gap much faster.
There's such a paradigm shift in society right now that we've got so much going on, and you could see it if you're looking for it. But when we had the blinders over our eyes, we don't see all this coming. And then that opens the door for Satan to come in and take over. And I think the ministry you two have is a wonderful blessing from God. And I'm just praying for good things to happen. I know that like us and many others in our church that are trying to do ministry, we come under attack. We become a target.
Oh, yeah.
Because we're trying to serve God.
Right.
and help families stay together. I mean, that's what